She's an artist, a best-selling author, a designer, and an instructor who has taught all over North America, Russia, and the Ukraine. And now, she's taking you back to the basics of creating wearable art from wire and beads.
Oh, hi! I'm Dale Cougar-Armstrong. Welcome to Jewel School. In today's classes, you're going to learn how to use wire, beads, and a few hand tools to create some amazing wearable art. When you are done learning these techniques, you're going to realize you are only limited by your own imagination as to how far you can take this art form. With just a few techniques, you'll learn to make a focal bead pendant, basic ear wires, Arabian window earrings, and these beautiful tulip column earrings. So let's begin by talking about the tools that you'll be using to create your wire jewelry designs. We use 4 basic tools about all the time. I have a pair of chain nose pliers, which are round on the outside and flat on the inside. We'll be using some round nose pliers, which are just that, round from one end to the other. I also have a pair of wire cutters, and we're going to talk about how to use these to save your wrist. And the most important tool of the basics for making traditional wire jewelry designs is a good pair of flat nose pliers. And we'll discuss these a little bit more later as well. Now, I also have something that you're going to find fun, and that's the sliding pin vise. This does some pretty cool magic. Now, found items from your home, go ahead and find an ultrafine point marker. How about an emery board? Everybody has an emery board, and if not, they're not very expensive. To clean my wire while I'm straightening it and to save my fingers, I either use a piece of old cotton t-shirt, because it has no lint, or just a small polishing cloth, not necessary to start out with. Tape, however, is very important, okay? I like to use 1/4-inch quilter's tape. You can also use any type of painter's tape, something that's not going to leave a lot of residue on your wire because it makes it difficult to get off. I mean, it's possible, and we'll talk about that, but something that makes your life easy is always better. Okay, now the wire we're going to be using, I actually have 2 different metals here. Okay, I have a 21 gauge square half hard in copper, and I also have a 21 gauge square half hard in silver filled. Now, it doesn't matter what your metal is, as long as the gauge, which is the size, the shape, obviously here square, and the temper, which is how hard the wire is the same. Okay, you can use any wire that you would like. Now, the second shape of wire that we're going to be using a lot of is 21 gauge round, and this is a half hard wire, so it holds its shape better. I also have a ruler. Now, your ruler can be any kind of ruler you would like. However, I prefer a translucent ruler because it's easy for me to see and measure items under the ruler. And it's very important to have one that is in inches as well as in millimeters, because most gemstones and beads are measured by the millimeter, and it's kind of important to know what you're using. The last of my personal favorite items to use with wire jewelry designs is a cushion-style mouse pad. I happen to go barefoot a lot, and getting wire on your feet's not fun. So something like this where you can shoot your wire pieces into is nice. It catches them. Also, your beads don't roll off, and if you stay with wire jewelry design, you're going to need a firm but giving surface to work with gemstones, and that's a possible future. Okay, for magnification, you know, if you have regular glasses, that's fine. If you don't need glasses, it's kind of smart to think about some safety glasses or magnifiers, because if a piece of wire, you know, flies up and puts a dent in your eye or something, we can't fix that. So using magnification is always good for seeing very small detailed parts. I have a pair of cheaters here so that you can see my eyes better. But I also like a pair of optivisors. Okay, so now let's work on preparing our round nose pliers. Now to do this, I'm going to be using my marker. I'm going to put on my glasses. And I'm going to use my ruler. And this is where the millimeters also comes in handy. Okay, so the first mark that we're going to make is going to be at the 2 millimeter. Okay, each of these little marks is just 1 millimeter. Okay, it takes 10 of them to make a centimeter, but right now we're only concerned with 1. So if we see right here, you can see that I have the tip of my plier at the number 2 millimeter. I'm going to use my marker and just make a quick mark across my plier. Okay, now the next mark that we're going to make is at 4 millimeters. And then we're going to move on to 7. I'm going to show you over here because I've already done mine. So here I have 2 millimeters, and then I have 4. Okay, the next mark you're going to make is 7. The fourth mark is 11. And the final mark way down here is at 16. Okay. Now, the reason that I have these marks in so many places is because over the years making jewelry, I kind of know where I want to place my wire. It's very important to think of any time you bend wire around something, the resulting shape is going to be just that much larger than the shape that you bent around. Okay, so go ahead and rearrange your workspace and let's get ready to begin our first project. The first project that we're going to work on today is a focal bead pendant. And this may seem rather simple, but as a technique instructor, to me it's very important that I teach you some simple ways to use your tools and little techniques and things to do with your wire that you can later combine into many different designs. Now, the techniques we're going to learn with this pendant today are how to make a wrapped loop, which in this case is going to be a bail. We're going to make a second wrap loop down here that we're going to use as a connection to hold the dangling charms that you're going to make yourself. And when we're all finished, you're going to see many variations for this particular design, and I'll share some with you too. Okay, so to begin, we're going to need our wire, and I'm going to need to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to use the 21 gauge square half hard wire. Okay, and because I want you to be able to use any bead that you would like, I'm going to give you the formula. Okay, so here's where my little translucent ruler comes in play. And if I measure across my bead, now if you're going to purchase more of these from the Jewel School section of JTV, you actually see that this is a 20 millimeter square. Now, if we turn that into English terms, okay, this is 3/4 of an inch. So the formula is the width of the bead plus 3 inches. So actually, I would only need 3 3/4 inches to make this piece, but because we're new today, we're going to just use an even 4 inches. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is get out our wire. We're going to learn to straighten and cut the wire. Okay, so the first thing we have to do when we straighten our wire is to gently take it out of its coil. Okay, now let's look at the wire and let's talk about what we're going to do, because really this is not as difficult as some people think. If we have a piece of wire, and if you think about the reasoning behind this, if something is curved in one direction and you slightly push it in another direction, you kind of should end up in the middle, which is straight. And that's what we're going to do with the wire. Okay, we're just going to counter the curve. Now, to do that, I'm going to be using my thumb and my index finger. Now, I can't pinch because that's like pulling, and you cannot pull wire straight. So I'm going to slightly round the edge of the wire over my thumb, countering the curve. So I'm going to put my finger here, my thumb here, and I want you to kind of watch this. You can actually see it happen if I can do this slow enough. Okay, do you see that changing? Right? Not quite. Let's do it a little bit more, a little more pressure. One more time. And that's a pretty straight wire. Okay, now I told you I was going to tell you a little bit more about the cutters and how to use them. Well, your cutters all have 2 sides. Okay, you have a flat side and you also have a divot side. Well, just think of it this way. Everything you do in wire jewelry, you have to see. So if we were to cut with the divot side, you can't see what's in there. But from the flat side, you can see. So everything from the flat side up we keep, because we can see it. So to measure my wire, I'm going to take my ruler and lay my wire alongside it. And we determined that I was going to just use 4 inches to make life a little easier. And I'm right alongside here, keeping my pliers, so everything I'm keeping is from the flat side up. Okay, I'm going to place this right here and just cut it. Okay, that's all there is to it. We now have one 4-inch piece of 21 gauge square half-hard wire. So set the rest of the wire aside and let's begin making our pendant. When we talk about different parts to our pendant, okay, I had talked about the bail. The bail was the round part at the top, okay? To make a nice bail, you're going to need a minimum of 3/4 of an inch. Now, the connection loop that's at the bottom, okay, that my charms are hanging in, that's a minimum of 3/4 of an inch. So let's go down from the top end of our pendant wire, 3/4 of an inch, and mark. I'm going to teach you good work habits, I hope. Okay, with my ruler facing me, so that the number 1 looks like it's in reverse because, you know, it's on the opposite side. There's nothing between me and my measurement except my wire. Let's line our wire up alongside our ruler and let's measure down 1.5 inches and mark with our marker right across, right, just like that. Okay, I always close my marker because these things will last forever if you keep them closed. Now, let's pick up our flat nose pliers. The flat nose pliers are actually square. They have a square tip, and they're straight up and down. Okay, they don't bulge out, they don't have a divot. This is a 90-degree tool, and that's what we need it for. So let's take our flat nose pliers, and let's place it on the wire so that the tip is just above my mark. So when I make my bend, my bend ends up exactly on my mark, right where we want it. Now this is a 90-degree bend. It's the letter L. Of course, it's upside down, but it doesn't matter. Just give you a point of reference. I'm going to take my round nose pliers. Remember, we marked them. This was the 16mm mark. Let's see if that's going to work. Okay, I'm going to actually put these, this is the shorter of the L wire. This is going to be the top of my pendant. If I put that there and look, you can see that's a pretty good sized bail. We might want it a little bit bigger depending on what you're going to be putting this on. So let's move it down just a little bit. Okay, I might be a millimeter below that. I'm going to take this short wire. I'm going to bend this up and over my tool. Now notice while this hand is going this way, this hand is going this way, so that I'm countering every move. Now I can't go any further because my tool is in the way. So I'm going to go back, keep my tool in the same position, rotate my pliers so it's no longer in the way. And now I can take this bottom wire again, and I can complete the circle around the jaw of my plier so that when I take this off, it almost looks like a kid's lollipop. Now, to make it look more like that lollipop, I'm going to use my flat nose pliers, place it on the entire loop, hold the tail, and just bend this loop so it's centered on top of the wire. It's that easy. Now, to wrap this in, I'm going to use 2 tools. I'm going to hold the shape I've just made with my flat nose pliers so I don't mess it up. And I'm going to put that in my non-dominant hand so that my dominant hand can grab the tail or shorter wire with the chain nose pliers. And I'm going to, very carefully, keeping this on the square, wrap this around the wire. Once you get good, you can just whip this around, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, now I've gone completely around that twice. Let's do it one more time. And that's 3 wraps. Now I'm going to trim the tail of that wire off, remembering that everything I'm keeping is from the flat side out. Okay, let's get down here and trim this. Notice I use my finger to keep my sharp wire end, to drop it on my mouse pad. Don't want it in my feet. Okay, and I do have a burr here. Now to tuck that burr in where I want it to be, I'm going to use the chain nose pliers. They have a very thin surface, but the inside is flat so I can grab onto something and make it happen. But the outside is round if I need that round shape. So let's put this on the wire end and let's just roll that wire end. Okay, that kind of deburrs it and it also smooths that down. Okay, so we now have one wrapped loop, okay? And all of the different techniques that you learned with that one wrap loop are gonna come in handy later. Okay, so it's fun time now. Let's add the bead. And I was trying to decide which. It's kind of smart to look at your bead and orient it in whatever shape that you would like to bring out, because a lot of our beads have different designs and different shapes. And sometimes they'll spin after you have it on the bail, but sometimes they won't. Mine probably will. Okay, this is kind of fun. These are actually dyed, and they have the name of a jasper. But the fun part about this is these are crinoid stems, okay? For those of you who are interested in fossils and in using organic materials, these are fossilized crinoid stems, a very early form of life. Okay, I've inserted my bead onto my wire. I'm going to try to keep the tucked end that we just did to the back. It may not always happen, but that's the goal, okay? So here we have the beginnings of our pendant. Now, in order to add my connection loop at the bottom, I have to hold the space. And the reason I have to hold the space is because I want to make consistent wraps on the bottom like I did on the top. So I'm going to use my chain nose pliers to hold the wire space, okay? And that's going to give you about 1.5 millimeters or so. And it really doesn't matter what size it is, just so that you become familiar with using your tool as a space holder, okay? So I'm going to hold that space. I'm going to use my finger to bend this bottom wire 90 degrees so it is perpendicular to my stone, okay? Because I want my loop to go this way. Now, to make the loop, we're going to repeat what we just did, except this time I'm going to go down here. I'm going to use mark number 4. I believe that was the 11 millimeter mark. Let's see what that's going to do. Okay, if I look at the size across here, okay, this is what I'm doing. So I'm teaching you how to use your tool while you're making this one project. Remembering that the shape I make is going to be just a little bit larger than that, let's go down a little bit smaller, okay? I'm going to go just below that mark. Yeah, and now again, I'm going to repeat the exact same procedure. Use my finger to bend this wire over the top of my tool while my hand with the tool moves so they work together. Get to the point where I cannot go any further. So I'm going to rotate my tool, keeping it in the same position so that I can now wrap my wire completely around the jaw. Again, my hands are both working together. And I have my second loop. Now I went a little bit further on this one, that's okay. I can make these adjustments while I'm holding the loop I just made with my flat nose pliers. I'm just going to pull that tail down. There we go. Now again, hold the shape that you just made with your flat nose pliers in your non-dominant hand. And use your chain nose pliers to grab onto the tail of the loop and very carefully and tightly begin your wraps immediately under the loop that you just made and work down the stem of the pendant. Okay, now that's 3 times, and that's the same amount that I have on the top. But let me tell you, it really doesn't matter. As long as you have one wrap, you're good. All right, so I have my wraps, and we're going to trim this now. Remembering everything I'm going to keep is from the flat side up. Get my wire down there. And then use your chain nose pliers to deburr and spin the end of that wire in. Okay, now, if you look at this piece, you see how this is kind of crooked? All right, I want that straight. So I'm going to use my flat nose pliers, put it over the entire unit, and bend the unit back. Okay, and now I'm straight, or straighter. Okay, so I have my bail, I have my bottom connection loop. Now we're going to learn how to make a couple of charms. We're not going to use head pins because back when I started making jewelry, They did make headpins. No, I'm not as old as Methuselah, but it's kind of fun to learn to make everything that you need, because then you can use what you have. You don't have to go out and buy more supplies. But if you have more supplies available, we're going to learn how to adjust those into other conditions. These are 2 charms right here. The reason I'm going to teach you to make 2 is because of the different sizes of the blocks, bead stops, rosettes, spirals, whatever you want to call them at the bottoms. Okay, for this, we're going to need your 21 gauge round half hard wire. Now, I know that on the market, round wire is readily available. However, you don't want to use a wire that's really soft, okay? So if you need more wire, we've got everything you need at jewelschool@jtv.com. Okay, so we're going to straighten, measure, and cut our wire. Again, I'm going to counter the curve by placing my index finger under and my thumb on top of the curve, next to one another, not pinching. I'm going to draw the wire through my fingers, countering that curve. That's pretty almost straight the first time. Let's give that one more shot. Okay, now, we know that we need a minimum of 3/4 of an inch to do a wrap loop, right? So if we're going to be doing a wrap loop at the top, that's 3/4 of an inch. If we're going to do a rosette or a spiral on the bottom, I'm going to give you some numbers. You need to have a minimum of 1/2 inch. You might use 5/8. You might use 3/4. So we're going to use 3/4 on this one, plus our bead combination. And what I'm doing here is I'm giving you the formula so that you can use any beads you want, any wire you have, and make anything using the same techniques that we're using today. All right, so let's measure and cut the necessary wire, knowing that I need 1.5 inches plus 5/8. So let's just say that I'm going to need 2 3/8 inches. Okay, so that's 2 inches and 2 marks after the quarter. Now that's for my longer wire. Okay, for some interest, we're going to make a longer one and a shorter one. So the shorter one, let's straighten some more wire. And actually, I don't need to use the ruler again. I can just use my first wire and say, okay, I want this a little shorter. Probably 1/2 inch is good. There you go. It's that easy. Now, to make a spiral, which is a very important part of wire jewelry design, and for some beaders too, I'm either going to use my chain nose pliers or my round nose pliers. Now, the reason being, depending on the width of my wire, if my wire is very, very fine, I will probably use my chain nose pliers because they have a flat grip inside that can grab that wire and a round surface that will roll the shape round where I want it. If I have a heavier wire like I do today, I'm going to just use my round nose pliers, okay? These are actually a thicker and not a needle nose, so I'm able to grab the end of the wire without it slipping off. And let's begin by marking the length of our spiral. So I'm going to use my marker and I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch from one end of my wire. This means that this will have a good sized or larger spiral. And if you're using your own beads and want to use whatever you want, the reason I'm marking this is because you can't go past 3/4 of an inch, okay? Otherwise you won't have enough room. So I'm going to use my flat nose pliers, which I use to make angles. And again, I'm going to place these just above my mark so that my bend ends up on the mark, okay? And I'm going to bend this with my finger, 90 degrees, or the letter L, okay? Now, to make a spiral, I'm going to use the ends of my round nose pliers. I'm going to place these on the very end of the wire, or as close as I can get. And if you want to make a circle and not the letter P, it's very important that you cannot feel the wire. Although I tell you, this is so small and that end is so close, we might not have a perfect circle this time, but it's okay. So notice that my hand is in this position. That's because I know that my hand likes to go this way. I don't want to hurt it by going all over the place, okay? Although that would be a fun dance. So I want to go this way. So my hand is going to start out here so that I get the most movement out of it possible. I'm going to hold on to the rest of my wire and support it with my non-dominant hand. And I'm going to roll my tool completely around. Now we know I can't go any further because my tool is in the way. So I'm going to release my grip, rotate my tool, regain my wire and grip again, and roll again. Now, let's see what happened. Actually, that's a pretty darn good little circle. Now I'm going to use my flat nose pliers, and if we think of this circle like a clock, okay, you got 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, well, in reverse for you, but whatever. I'm going to come in at like 5 o'clock, okay? And why I'm doing this is because I'm actually grabbing the bottom wire at the bottom of this circle. Okay, and that's what I'm gripping. And I'm going to actually roll this circle onto itself. Okay, so like this. All right, let's do that again. And you see a spiral starting to appear. Did you know that the spiral has been around since the beginning of history? Actually, since pre-recorded history. It's a symbol of life. There you go. And we have just made your first spiral. Okay, we're going to do that again on the shorter piece of wire, but this time we're only going to make it 1/2 inch long. So that means you need to measure and mark your shorter wire so that you don't go beyond 1/2 inch. And like before, bend the wire to a 90-degree angle, roll a circle, and center it. All right, you've done 2 spirals, pretty cool. Now let's add the bead combination. What I'm using for beads today, I have some 4mm bicones. They kind of have a point on each end. I have some 6mm rondelles. They're like a circle with a cutoff top and bottom. And I also have some 6mm faceted round beads. You really don't need a lot. If you have others that you would like to use, that's fine, go for it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to thread some of these beads on here. I'm actually going to mimic what I have over here. All right, I've got a 4mm, a round, and a rondelle. Personally, I like to put the weight of my project on top, so I'm stringing these beads from smallest to largest. All right, so after you have your beads on, we have to make another wrapped loop. So here we go, repeating what we've done twice before. I'm going to hold the space I need with my chain nose pliers by placing them immediately after the last bead and trying to remember to keep my pliers perpendicular, or like the letter T, to the spiral that I made, okay? And I'm going to use my finger to bend the wire 90 degrees, forming that little elbow that I need. And now on my tool, I'm going to use probably mark number 2, okay? The mark number 2 is right here, and that's about 4mm down. So I'm going to place that on the top wire. I'm going to make sure that my mark is on my wire. And I'm going to use my finger to bend this wire over the top of my tool. Down the other side till I can't go any further. I'm going to rotate my tool, keeping it at the same mark, and bend my wire completely around the jaw. Okay? Now, before I close it, this is very important, and this is why we're doing this. Okay, after I have this closed, I'm going to use my chain nose pliers and I'm going to slightly open this loop, because I have to put it in my connection loop on my pendant. So remembering that the smaller loop was my connection loop, I'm going to slide this wire through here. Now they're locked in. Okay, now I can't hold that loop closed with my flat nose pliers because obviously they're too big. And I'm going to be using my chain nails pliers to work with the tail. So I'm going to hold the loop I just made using my round nose pliers. And again, moving this to my non-dominant hand. Okay, I'm going to use the chain nose pliers to grab onto the end or tail of my wire and very carefully wrap this around. 1, 2, 3 times. Okay, now I have to do something with my tail here. And you can see that it's kind of curved. And the reason that I over curve this wire is because as we're beginning to find out, if we tell the wire where to go, it's going to do what we want it to do. And that's what this whole class is about. So where the wire is curved to go in that direction, I'm going to trim it so it's a little longer. And now I'm going to use my chain nose pliers. I'm going to tuck this wire around the edge. And I'm just going to roll my tool. And that takes that wire end right in where it needs to be. It's gone. No sharp edges, nothing sticking out. Okay, so now let's use our longer piece of wire and let's make another beaded segment on top of our spiral. So, aren't you amazed? You have just learned several very important wire jewelry techniques. To review, we've made wrap loops. We've learned to make head pin. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, they actually make these things called head pins, but you can make your own now, complete with spirals. You've learned to make connections. You've learned to turn it into a bail, and you've created a whole pendant. So, let me show you some of the things that you can now do with these magical techniques. This piece is actually a variation of what we just did. Now, when you look at something like this, notice that the bead is bigger, so you have to go back and remember the formula I taught you at the very beginning of our lesson. And the difference down here, my dear, is that instead of 1 wrap loop, I put 2. So think about the possibilities. Now, you could actually take this and make 3, 4, 5, as many loops as you would want. I also added some bead caps and I did some additional beads here. This is just another pendant idea. You can get them as big or as small as you'd like. Something like this piece that I made is very simple. It's actually a piece of chain, okay? And on each piece of chain, I have put 1 or 2 little wrap loop drops, just like we just made. And then I attached all of those chains to 1 ring, which could be a wrap loop, stuck it on a chain. There you go. Piece of cake. Also, with the wrap loop idea, you can now make your own earrings. Okay, check it out. You can use your own beads, crystals, combinations. Go shopping on JTV and see what they have. It's amazing. But, oh, wait a minute, I forgot. You can't make earrings yet because you don't know how to make ear wires. So our next project is going to be how to learn to make your own ear wires. Probably the most important part of an earring is the part that goes through the ear. Now, there are several different styles. I prefer the French ear wires, although I have no idea where the word French or description came from. But I do know that either ear wires work or they don't. Either they are the right length or they're too long and they hurt the back of your head, or they're too short and they come out of your ear as you're walking and you lose a very important part of your earring, like the whole thing. So the next important technique I'm going to teach you is how to make your own French ear wire. To make this project, we're going to be using 21 gauge half hard round wire. Believe it or not, even though this is just a half hard, meaning number 2 on the hardness charts, this is going to have enough spring to take the abuse of bending and opening and closing your ear wires multiple times. So let's begin making our own ear wires. For each ear wire, I'm going to need a 2 1/4 inch piece of wire. We already talked about how to measure and how to cut. So just reviewing, you'll notice that everything I'm keeping is from the flat side up. This is called easy cut, okay? I measured once, I cut twice. I think that's a carpenter's thing. Okay, so now I have my wires, and I'm going to need my round nose pliers. Remember earlier I talked with you about making a perfect circle and said that you had to keep your wire inside your tool? Well, we weren't able to do that then, but now I can, so I can show you how to make a perfect circle. We're going to use mark number 2 on the round nose pliers. Going to make sure that I can't feel the wire, which I could. I still can. There we go. Okay. When you cannot feel the wire, you know all of the wire is inside the tool, therefore all of it is going to be bent. None of it will be flat, so you're going to not make the letter P. I'm going to roll this tool with my wire down my hand. I've come as far as I can, tool's in the way, release my grip, spin it around, keeping the same position, tighten up, grab some more wire, and roll again. We should have a perfect circle. Okay, now let's make a second one on our second ear wire. Place the wire in the tool, roll, release, grab some more wire, continue the roll. There we go. Now, let's introduce the pin vise. Although not in the capacity that I said was going to be a lot of fun, it's got a cool shape and it's got these neat ridges, which I tend to use for anything but what it was probably designed for. I'm going to use this as a shaping tool. So I'm going to hold the eye, which is the circle that I made, against my tool. I'm going to grab the other tail on the back side, and I'm going to wrap this wire around my pin vise. I'm going to overcompensate, meaning go beyond my loop, because when I let go, the spring in the wire will take it back. Now that needs to be shaped a little bit more, so let me show you how to fix that, because I mess up too. I'm going to hold this here. I'm going to take my eye and I'm going to bend the eye around the tool. That's a little better. Okay. Now, make the second ear wire in the same manner. There's no way to keep this straight while you're working with it, so I'm going to fix that by using my flat nose pliers. And this is really cool too because it shows you how you can utilize your tools for different purposes other than what you thought they were for. So I'm going to take this curve, you see that horrible little curve there? And I'm going to use my flat nose pliers by placing them on the entire item and then move it where I need it to be. And I will do this until I'm happy with the result. Usually it doesn't take long. Now use your flat nose pliers to shape the second ear wire. All right, there we go. I have 2 ear wires. Now let's fix the tail of the ear wire, which is what makes it easy to put the ear wire through your ear. Now to do that, I know that my tail needs to be about 1/4 of an inch long, okay? And I want to show you how I use my tools as shaping and measuring items, okay? If I take my flat nose pliers, and let's just start this at the number 1, and I'm going to put that on my ruler. Here we go. Okay, you can see that the width of my tool is almost 1/4 of an inch, okay? This means that anytime I need to measure 1/4 of an inch to make a bend, I can just use the width of my tool. I don't have to use a ruler again. So if my tails on my ear wires are 1/4 of an inch long, I'm going to place my flat nose pliers on the tail, leaving just a little bit, and I'm going to bend these back less than 45 degrees. Now bend the tail back on the second ear wire. Okay, so now I have a pair of ear wires, which means I have to make a pair of earrings to go on the ear wires. Stay tuned, that's next. You know, often people ask me where my inspiration comes from, and really, I have no earthly idea. But I can tell you that the earring design we're going to make next came, not too long ago, When I was listening to a certain piece of music called Scheherazade, The Tales of Scheherazade, is what the story was about, and I was making these earrings with different components, wondering what the heck I should call them. Well, listening to that music and looking at this shape, thus the name Arabian Windows. Now, designer jewelry is nothing more really than a beautiful collection of well-executed components, okay? Everything from what we've already done to what I'm presently wearing here is just wire and beads and your imagination and a few tools. So let's begin learning how to make some of these components so that you too can be a wire jewelry designer. To make these earrings, we're going to use both of the wires we have previously played with. We're going to be using the 21 gauge round, number 2 hard, and we're going to be using the 21 gauge square, number 2 hard. The usual tools. I'm going to add a tool, and I know this is rather odd, and people give me funny looks. It's a funky bottle, yeah, but, okay, I choose my items for reasons, okay? My found items, number 1, they don't make anything like this yet. And number 2, it has a reason. The light plastic cover over the hard plastic has a give to it. So I often use this for a shaping item, as you're going to see today. You can find whatever you need. I'm going to be giving you the diameter to find your own tool. So let's begin learning how to make my Arabian window earrings. Now, I'm not going to repeat everything as slowly as I have before because this is kind of a review. And we're going to be building onto each technique as we move through these projects. So go ahead and see if you can remember how to straighten, measure, and cut your wire. We're going to be needing 2 pieces each of the 21 gauge square half hard, 2 inches long, and 2 pieces each 2.5 inches long. Straighten and clean, then measure and cut, using the first piece of each wire to cut the second. Okay, so now we're going to learn how to use the sliding pin vise, adding a little bit of magic to your wire. I'm going to take the 2.5 inch piece of wire, and one of these is for each earring. I'm going to place the end of this into the pin vise, about 1/8 of an inch, and if you're not sure how much that is, it would be close to 3 millimeters or 2 little lines on your ruler. And now I'm pushing this nut up very tightly. And if your tool is new, believe me, sometimes it doesn't want to slide up there easily, so you kind of have to work at it. After this tool's been worked up a little bit and it's broken in, it's phenomenal. Okay, now I'm going to place the other end of the wire inside my flat nose pliers. Now I'm not going to place it this way because this means I want to pull. You cannot pull because you will pull it right out. So I'm going to hold it this way. And if I hold my wire about 2/3 of the way down in my tool, okay, down meaning this way, that means I don't have to hold it as tightly as I would if I were holding it up in the top. Now, using my pin vise, I'm just going to roll this tool away from me or in a clockwise motion. And do you see what's happening? Do you see how that wire is turning different? It's twisting, it's adding a bead. Kind of fun, huh? Now twist a second piece in the same manner. All right, so we've learned to use the pin vise now, and we're going to return to the top wire, the top part of the earring. Okay, the very top right here. We're going to make the top part of this earring out of the 2 inch plain square wire. Now, in order to produce the window-like effect, first I'm going to have to find the center of my wire. Now, you can do this one of 2 different ways, okay? Either you can measure it and mark it with your marker, or you can just find it on your ruler. Okay, and that's what I'm going to do because the other way is obvious. Okay, so if I place my wire next to my ruler, okay, it's 2 inches long, so my center is going to be at the 1. I'm going to place my round nose pliers on the wire at the number 1 position. So basically, this is the center of my wire, okay? Now, to make that keyhole shape, or the top of my window shape, okay, I'm going to make sure that that's firmly in there. I'm going to press equally on both sides of the wire, get it started to be bending over my tool. And what's fun here is because this is round, I can actually make it happen evenly without even marking it. Now you see how this side's a little bit longer? I'm going to press this one toward the other one. Now let's back the short one away, press the long one toward it, and look at that. They have equal legs, okay? So now let's do the keyhole effect. If you've got a piece of wire that looks like this with the bend in the center, I'm going to put my tool on here, and if I just loosen my grip, okay, I'm not holding it, I can spin these tools around, right? So the whole idea here is to loosen your grip, but keep the top jaw down so it doesn't flop around. And I'm going to roll my tool toward one side. Now I cannot go any further here because I'm hitting resistance, okay? The jaw of my plier is hitting the wire. This is when I tighten up on my grip and I dip my wire. Okay, and the result is this, a drunken P. There you go. Now I'm going to come in on the other side, and because my hand likes to go like this, I'm going to turn the piece around because going like that's kind of awkward. So I'm going to replace my tool inside my opening, and again, keep it loose grip, spin around, hit resistance, tighten up, and dip. Now I have something that looks like this. And that side didn't come out quite right, so I'm going to go back in and just tweak that a hair more. There we go. Now, can you see where this kind of looks like an old-fashioned keyhole shape? Okay, that's where the name of this design came from. Now, to get this spread out to resemble the top of my earring, I'm going to have to use my flat nose pliers to hold the top of the earring with the shape I just made. And then I can easy fan those out just a hair. There we go. That's it. Now I'm going to repeat the process on the second wire, and hopefully so are you. Find the center of the wire, bend it equally on both sides of the plier jaw, forming a tight U. Rotate the pliers until you feel resistance and dip. Spin and dip on the other side. Then use flat nose pliers to bend the leg slightly out. All right, so the next step here is to make some new connection loops. Now, some of the parts I'm going to be teaching you how to make here are going to be able to go together in many different configurations in the future. And I'm going to show you some of those, so pay attention and do your practice. And even if you don't like the earring design, let's make it together anyway, because the techniques are very important. Now, once again, using your round nose pliers, okay, now we're going to use the marks. And remember, we have marks all the way down to 16 millimeters. I'm going to use the second mark in, which is about 4 millimeters. Keeping in mind that I want to make a circle whenever possible, make sure my wire is in my tool. And I'm going to tighten up and roll my tool back toward the wire. When I cannot go any further, I'm going to release my grip, come back around, grab some more wire, and barely roll my tool so that you have a circle. Now, normally, I wouldn't even take those out now, because we're going to take this one step further, okay? I'm going to bring my grip back around like we did before with the keyhole, tighten it up on the other side, and slightly dip my loop toward the front of the earring, okay? And what this does is this forms a connection loop on the side or perpendicular to the keyhole. And we're going to repeat this on the other leg using number 2. You notice how it's a little bit open? That's cool because we're going to have to open it anyway. So go ahead and repeat the procedure of making a connection link at each bottom of the other legs on your keyhole. Okay, now the links that you have just made are also called keyhole links, and these can be used to make a variety of chains and other designs. These are all techniques, as I told you earlier, that can combine together to make really beautiful jewelry designs. Now, the second technique that we're going to use today, making a different component, we're going to use the 2 twisted wires that we made. And again, these were the 2.5-inch 21 gauge square half hard wires. We twisted them individually by hand, and now I'm going to have to shape these. Well, depending on what you're using for a shaping item, you can actually shape them at the very same time. And here we go with my very strange little shaping item, okay? I'm going to kind of find the center and hold the center of the wires down with my thumb. In this manner, I can also show you at the same time. Yay. Okay, I'm going to grab onto both of these wires and bring them around my shaping item. Let's crisscross them over. Okay, let's give them some overcompensation and let them go so that when I remove them, I have 2 horseshoes. Okay, pretty cool. So after I have my horseshoe shapes, they have to be the same length. And we'll notice that one leg is longer on each of them. To make these the same length, okay, can you see this? I have one shorter, one longer. I'm simply going to trim it here and trim it here. And now I have the same length. Okay, we're going to set those aside. This is kind of like, well, it could be called the horseshoe length. It could be called the stirrup length. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later as well. But first we have to make the charms that are going to go on these lengths before we start playing around with them too much and putting bead stops on them. So to make the charms that I'm talking about right here, okay, I'm going to be using 21 gauge round half hard wire. Now I have 3 on here. You can put 5, 1, whatever you want. Artists actually use more uneven numbers than they do even. I don't know, maybe it's because we're off balanced and even is balanced, but anyway, it always looks better if you use uneven numbers. So we're going to make this design using 3 on each. So we'll have to make 6 head pin charms using homemade head pins. Now, what I'm doing for my wire, as I mentioned, I'm using the 21 gauge round half hard, and my shorter side wires are each going to be 2 inches long, and my longer center wires are each going to be 3 inches long. So I will need 4 2-inch wires and 2 3-inch wires. Okay, now if we look at the bottoms of these 2 different charms, you will notice that the bottom of the shorter charm has a smaller spiral than the larger one. So not only here, I'm going to verbally tell you, but also in your written follow-up directions that accompany this DVD lesson, you're going to find my favorite numbers for lengths of wire to make perfect revolution spirals every single time. The ones that we're going to use today on the shorter wires are each 5/8 of an inch long. Now, I don't want anybody to get really confused, so let me show you, okay? 5/8 of an inch means that we have a 1/2 inch plus 2 little marks. So go ahead and measure and mark 5/8 of an inch on each of your 2-inch wires. Okay, and then on the 3-inch wire, the longer one, we're going to use 3/4 of an inch, which is a 1/2 plus a 1/4. Okay, so that's 3/4 of an inch. Go ahead and mark each of your 3-inch wires at 3/4 of an inch and your shorter wires at 5/8 of an inch, or 2 marks past the center. I'm going to show you something here, quick time saver too. And I guess some people would call these tricks, but really there are no tricks in wire jewelry design. None. There are only tips and technique. So what I did here is, because I have to make this measurement 4 times, I made it once. And now I'm going to use my pliers to make my bend in 2 wires as one. And now let's bring up another short wire, make a similar bend here, and one on the last wire. So these are just some time-saving little technique tips. Now on the 3-inch wires, obviously, I'm going to be using my flat nose pliers to make a 90-degree bend as well on the marks. I'm making these both at the same time. Now, if you remember to review how to make a spiral, you're going to take your round nose pliers, place the tip of them on the short wire, and you're going to roll the wire onto itself, and then come in at 5 o'clock with your flat nose pliers and roll the loop that you made alongside the wire all the way up so it's centered at the end like a lollipop. Okay, so go ahead and make all of your spirals, and when you're ready, come on back and let's make them into charms. Let's go ahead and add your bead combination. I'm going to tell you what I'm using today. However, you can use anything that you would like. An interesting idea here, which is kind of fun too, is to recycle old jewelry. So if you have some of your sisters, well, maybe not your sisters, but your moms or your grandmas, or if you go to flea markets or yard sales and pick up some old jewelry and take it apart, this is a great way to use some of those beads and components. I actually have a couple of 8mm collars here with rhinestone type crystals in them for a little bit of bling. And I also have some 6mm and 8mm rondelles in this really gorgeous aqua glass. It's going to be really, really pretty with the silver. Okay, so go ahead and start adding your beads to your spiral wire or homemade head pins, remembering that you have to leave about 3/4 of an inch on the top of every wire so we can make a wrap loop. So go ahead and start beading. Okay, as soon as you have one of your spiral wires or homemade head pins beaded, it's very important to remember to lock the beads on. For this, remember, we're going to be using our chain nose pliers. Be sure to place them perpendicular or like the letter T onto your wire according to where your spiral is, and then use your finger to bend the wire 90 degrees to one side or the other. Okay, I'm going to do this on each of my bead wires and set them all aside because it's easier for me to do it that way. And then we're going to learn to make all of the wrap loops at the same time. Okay, now here's something that you might want to take into account is the fact that you're making a left earring and a right earring. And although as a beginner, it's not wicked important to do this the first time around, but you might want to take into consideration in which direction your spirals are facing. So for example, if I want these to be opposites on an earring, then if my wire is bent toward the back of this one, I would want to bend it toward the front of this one. Therefore, when I put them side by side, you see, they're going to be facing one another, in other words, making a mirror image pair. So if you haven't already done so, don't worry about it. It's not that important right now, which is why I hadn't mentioned it yet. But if you are pretty proficient at this, go ahead and try to make a mirror matching pair. And now it's time to make a loop on each single one. And because we're going to be threading these onto the stirrup or horseshoe component that we made, you don't have to worry about not locking them in, okay? So go ahead and make wrap loops. This is a really good time to practice making the wrap loops so that you become more consistent. And you're going to have a really nice product when you're finished too. You could actually make these this afternoon and wear them outside tonight, and people are not going to believe you made your own earrings. So I'm going to be using the second mark on my round nose pliers. Again, just reviewing, let's put that in the upper corner of the 90-degree angle that we just made. You use my finger to bend the wire over the jaw of the plier. So it's coming down the other side. I cannot go any farther. Rotate the tool. Keep it at the same location. And use your finger to bring the wire back around the plier jaw so that you have a perfect circle with a tail. Hold that circle made with your flat nose pliers in your non-dominant hand and use your chain nose pliers to wrap the tail around the bead stem as evenly as you can. Minimum of one, okay? We actually have left enough here, and we left enough wire, the 3/4 of an inch, so that we could put 3 nice wraps on that. And remember, to finish these off nice, I go around even though I'm overlapping, and then bring it back, giving that wire the direction that it needs, so that after I trim it, I can use my chain nose pliers to just tuck this wire because I've already told it where to go. Okay, so go ahead and continue making a wrap loop at the top of every single one of the rest of your 5 head pin spiral charms. Place the round nose pliers at the top of the 90-degree angle. Bend the wire up and around the jaw of the plier. Rotate the plier and bring the wire back around the jaw to create a full circle with a tail. Hold the circle just made with flat nose pliers and use chain nose pliers to wrap the tail around the bead stem. Trim and tuck the wire. Now, slide the charms onto the wire horseshoe. Okay, so I've got one down, and to lock these on, instead of using your chain nose pliers to make a bead stop a 90-degree angle in this wire to keep your beads in place, we're going to do something a little bit different, which is actually a technique that's going to add to our design, okay? And what we're going to do is use your round nose pliers, and we're actually going to do this around, probably between, I would seriously say between number 3 and number 4 on the marks. Let me just see what that would be for my very inquiring minds, including mine. Between a 3 and a 4, okay, so that's about 5 millimeters. We're somewhere in that general idea. And what I'm going to do is we have to make a complete circle, okay? So I'm going to place my tool. Yeah, and I'll just use that 3rd mark because it's easier. Remember, I have to place my tool so that my wire I cannot feel. Okay, and I'm going to be rolling this to the side, okay? Kind of like an urn, like to the side, a handle on an urn. So holding my pliers in that position, I'm going to roll my tool without pulling it. Okay, and you know what to do next. Loosen your grip, spin your tool back around, tighten it up to grab some more wire, and then continue to roll. You see that you make a nice, perfect circle. And go ahead and do that on the other side of this first horseshoe, and then put your beads on your second horseshoe link and put your connection loops on the outside. Remember, we're using number 3. Okay, after you have your links made and your little head pin spiral charm things, we'll have to come up with a name for those. Somebody let me know, okay? After you have these locked in and locked on and you're ready to move ahead with your earrings, you have to make sure that these shapes are pretty much similar, okay? So I'm going to hold both of the eyes, okay, like this, and I'm just going to bounce them toward one another a little bit, giving me more of a, almost like a defined U or a teardrop shape, okay? I'm going to repeat that procedure with the other link so that I can get a similar shape, okay? And these are pretty darn close. Again, you can always tell yourself they're gonna be on opposite sides of the head, and seriously, symmetry and I did not become friends personally until a few years ago, so it's perfectly okay if they don't match. Okay, now that we have these things done and we're happy with the shapes, we're going to put all of this together, all right? This is the exciting part. We are very close to being able to wear these things, okay? So going back to the keyhole links that we made first, okay? And remembering that the back of our earring should be where our openings open and close. So I actually had the back facing me. All right, let's go ahead and take those openings and place them into the connection loops we just made on each side of our U. Okay, let me show you this one. It's not quite open enough. That's a good thing, so I can show you how to do it. Using your chain nose pliers on the open end, let's just go ahead and slightly bend that wire away from the opening, just like that. Okay, do you see how that's twisted? And that opens our link. Now I can put this onto my connection loop. Let me show you how to close this, okay? I'm going to place my chain nose pliers on the very end of the wire that I moved. And I'm just going to bend this back the way it came. And after I get it there, to make sure that it's flush, I'm just going to hit both of those wires at the same time, putting them both into the same plane. Now you see where that is not as closed, as tight as I would like it to be. Let's just use our flat nose pliers, and remembering how we did a spiral, if I grab onto this around number 5 and spin my loop, look at that, it closes up nice and tight. Okay, so let's go ahead and connect each of our legs to each of our links, and then we're going to talk about how to make them mirror image if we hadn't done so in the beginning. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you something else that you can actually make for yourself. You don't have to have earring tree. I actually have an earring tree here that I can use. However, you may not have one. And I was going to bring it with me today, and I apologize I didn't. What I had done is I took a water bottle, and I used a pair of scissors, and I cut the top off my water bottle, and I used that to hang my earrings on. So you can make your own earring hanger while you work. And the reason is right here, okay? First, let's put the ear wires on our earrings, and then I'll show you this little tip that you can use. Now, to put the ear wires on the earrings, I'm going to repeat the same process that I used to put the links on from my keyholes to my horseshoes. Using my chain nose pliers up near the end, I'm simply going to twist the opening away to open it. And let's put the link in. And then let's go back to here on the edge, and let's just roll that back. Okay, and flatten it. Cool, so now it's done. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so let's put this on our water bottle or our earring tree, and let's make the second earring. Okay, so we're done. And I have to tell you, the reason that I hang my earrings on a water bottle or plastic container or an earring tree is so I can look at every single detail, okay? Not one piece of jewelry leaves my house, studio, wherever I'm working, hotel room, without me looking at and scrutinizing every single little thing, okay? If I'm giving it away, if I'm selling it, if I'm going to wear it myself, it has to be my personal best. And to me, this is the easiest way for me to do this. Now, while we are looking at our earrings, okay, let's talk about making the mirror images again, as I said that we would. Okay, for this, I'm going to have to wear my glasses, and I'm going to look at my earrings, okay? If my center spiral, like here, this is going this way, therefore this spiral is going toward it, and that one's going the same direction. I really should change one of these. Okay, so here's another little design tip. When you have earrings or designs that go out, they have a tendency to catch onto clothing or to hair more easily. And it's also kind of like a flow away from the center, like a pushing away from the center. I kind of like all my things to go in, to kind of go together, to hold together. It's totally up to you. You are the one becoming the designer, okay? So it's up to you whether or not you would turn my earring design so that the spiral's faced in or out. As for me, I'm going to face them in. Now, to do that and make this little subtle change, I'm going to use my flat nose pliers and my chains. My chain nose pliers, again, because they have a flat surface, I'm going to hold on to my wire up here. And I'm going to use my flat nose pliers to carefully twist my spiral in the opposite direction. Now let's see if I did that in the right way. Okay, so if we were to look at this design again, now this spiral goes in, that one goes in, and the center one is the center one. The only way that you can work with the centers is if they face either toward or away from one another on each ear. If I look at this earring, okay, I'm going to have to make a few adjustments. So while I adjust mine, why don't you look at yours and you make the necessary adjustments. Now, let's talk about some of the possibilities that these components have in making other jewelry designs you might enjoy. For example, if we look at the pendant right here on this chain, the top part of this pendant is actually made of the keyhole link that we made at the top of our earrings. Let me tell you how I made this, okay? This is a large briolette bead. It's a 20 by 30, meaning it's 20 millimeters across and 30 millimeters up and down. All I did was take a piece of our 21 gauge round wire. I put 3 beads on it and I wrapped it lightly around the bottoms of the legs. That's all I did. You can do this too. Oh yeah, and something else I think is very cool. I've got these too. Check it out. Another pair of earrings. Now the fun part about these earrings, which I call half a heart, like, you know, half a heart, whatever. This is everything that we've done so far. This is the horseshoe link stretched out with an extra loop on the top to put our ear wire in. And it is 2 head pin charms. So here you have 3 different designs that can be made just with the one we learned today. Remember, you can find jewelry making tools and supplies at jewelschool.com. You know, although I've had a good time working on our other projects, the next project happens to be my very favorite right now because it kind of gets into the meat of what I really do, traditional wire jewelry design. I'm going to be introducing you to another wire, basically an 18 gauge half round, half hard wire. And I'm going to be using the same beads or combinations of beads that we've had before, but we're going to be doing some pretty serious technique. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to straighten, measure, and cut a piece of our 21 gauge square half hard wire. And I know that you had as much fun as I did using the pin vise, but I'm going to show you something a little bit different today. So let's just take our wire. We're going to eventually need 10 pieces, each one 3 inches long. However, several of those wires are going to be twisted. So rather than twisting them all individually, I'm going to introduce you to one of my favorite tools. So let's start out with a 12-inch piece of wire. And my magic tool of the moment, my drill. Okay, using a drill is really not cheating. It just makes your life a little easier and it makes your twisted wire a little bit more consistent. So let's talk about how to use the drill while we twist this one piece of wire. Okay, I'm going to open my drill, and it doesn't matter if you have one like this or if you have a cordless screwdriver with a keyless hex chuck, or if you have your pin vise. Okay, your pin vise works good too, but ladies, you can now have a reason to borrow your husband or boyfriend's drill. And gentlemen, now you have a reason to bring your power tools into the house. Using my flat nose pliers to hold the opposite end of my wire, again, similar to how I use the pin vise. Okay, we're not going to hold it in this fashion because it means you want to pull and you really don't want to pull it out of here. So I'm going to hold it this way. And again, same as pin vise, about 2/3 of the way down into the jaw of my plier. Okay, so I'm just going to push the button and let the wire twist. Now, I don't know if you could see that, but that's pretty cool. To release the wire, I'm just going to open the drill and take the wire out. Okay, I'm also going to just trim off the two ends that didn't quite get as twisted as I wanted them to. And that's why we only put about 1/8 of an inch of wire into the drill. If you really want to twist all of it and you want the entire foot twisted, then I do recommend putting about 1/8 of an inch longer into your length so that when you cut it off, you still have a foot. Okay, so let's go ahead and cut these. As I mentioned earlier, I need 4 pieces of twisted wire, each 3 inches long. So I'm going to cut this in the same fashion that we've been cutting wire. And if I'm going to cut my second one, of course, I don't need my ruler. I'm just going to butt the first one against the second one and continue cutting. Okay, so I have my 4 twisted wires. I'm also going to need some straight 21 gauge square half hard wire, and I will need 6 pieces of it. And the reason that we're doing it this way, folks, is because you really need an odd number of wires in a bundle to make something that has a center. Okay, I have cut my wire. I believe I have enough here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4 of these. Cool. So let's talk about what we're going to be doing with this wire, okay? The design I actually came up with, I call the tulip column earrings. And the reason being because the way I configure the wire around the beads, both shown here at the top and at the bottom, resembles a tulip, okay, an Art Nouveau tulip. So by calling these the tulip column earrings, it's kind of describing what you're going to be doing as far as technique goes. You're also going to be wrapping wire, as you can see, and they kind of look like a Grecian column, so that's where that name particularly came from. So let's get started preparing our tape and bundling our wire. Now, to prepare the tape, usually when I pick up my roll, I'm kind of spoiled. I have a tabbed end, so I'm going to take that off because you probably don't have that on yours. And taping may seem silly, but it's actually very important. I kind of prefer a 1/4 inch quilter's tape. You can use a painter's tape. I'm tearing off about 1.5 inches of tape. Let's just check that measurement. Okay, and I'm folding part of the sticky back down onto itself, forming this little tab. Okay, now I'm going to prepare 4 different pieces of tape because I will need 2 for each earring bundle. Let me tell you a little bit more about the tape while we're preparing this. If you have a tape that's going to leave a sticky residue, you're going to have to use like an acetone or a denatured alcohol to get rid of it. If you use something like this or a painter's tape and you leave your tape on your pieces for a while, it shouldn't leave any extra residue. But taping the proper way is very, very important, and it's going to make perfect sense to you in just a couple of minutes. Okay, now, to prepare my wire bundles, I'm going to need 2 bundles, each one consisting of 5 wires. I'm going to use 3 plain wires and 2 twisted wires for each bundle. Okay, and I'm going to sandwich my twisted wires between the plain ones. So I have plain, twisted, plain, twisted, plain. And after I have these together, I'm going to tap them down. So I have one flush end, okay, meaning one end that's straight across. Now, here's where the tricky part of the tape goes in. I'm going to take my tape, place it across the end of my bundle, and press it down. Now, notice there's still some tape sticking up over here. I'm going to fold that down onto the back of my bundle. Let's look at that. So that the sticky part of the tape is sticking to the wire and not to the sticky part of the tape. If you make sticky stick to sticky, it will never come off. And the reason that we want to do this is so we can use this tape as many times as possible. I'm going to put a little bit of tension on this, and I'm going to pull it across my bundle and press it down, and then tension, press. Now, obviously, I have a little bit too much tape here, so I'm going to fold it down onto itself so I don't wear it to dinner tonight. That's kind of like part of the uniform. All right, now I have my bundle. It has one flesh end. I'm going to hold my bundle on the tape I just put on and draw the wires up through my fingers, keeping them all together. And I'm actually making a 1x5 plank of wire, okay? Now, once I have my bundle together, I'm going to put another piece of tape at the other end, folding the sticky part onto the wire, kind of anchors it, and give it a little bit of tension and press, little bit of tension and press. And then I'm going to tuck the rest of this tape up because it really doesn't look good on your arms. Okay, now I have one wire bundle. This is one earring bundle. I'm going to prepare the second one. Sandwich the twisted wires between the plain wires. Tape one end and then tape the second end. I now have two earring bundles. 2 5x1 planks of wire. Now, remembering what we've done before, I'm going to measure and mark my bundles. Keeping my ruler so that my wire is between me and it, I'm going to place the flush end of my bundle against the number 0, measure down to 1 inch, and make a mark across my wire. Now, the nice part about this is I don't have to use my ruler again if I don't want to. I can simply take my second wire bundle, put it next to the first, make sure that both flush ends are equal to one another, and mark my second bundle, just like that. Okay, remember to close your marker. They last a lot longer that way. Okay, now let's go to the 18 gauge half round wire. And the fun part about this wire is it's like half a circle, okay? You know where a circle is round? And if you cut it in half, you have like a half a circle, okay? This is a half round wire. And it's very important to know that the inside or back side of the half round wire is the flat side, okay? And the outside or right side is the rounded side, the domed. Now, I just straightened this the same way I would straighten any wire. And I'm going to measure and cut this wire. I will need one piece 4 inches long. Okay. Now, I know that we can't get in close enough to see this, but if you look at your wire, usually the inside of the coil is more shiny. That's the flat side. That's the back side. Now, if I slowly turn this over, you can see the front side or right side is domed, okay? It's not as shiny. And that's kind of one of the ways that you can tell, okay? So looking at our bundle now, we're going to use our flat nose pliers. It really doesn't matter if you have the same flat nose pliers as I do or not, okay? The idea is to make a hook using the flat nose pliers and the half round wire. Now, because the back of my wire is flat, I want that to be inside my tool, okay? And we know that this tool is close to 1/4 of an inch wide. Guess what? My wire is not. Therefore, I need to choke up on or shorten the amount of wire that's in my tool. I'm going to use about half of it. Now, because you're new, if you want, you can make your hook bigger and trim it off later. Again, I'm just trying to teach you good work habits. It really doesn't matter which way you do it, as long as you get your hook made. Now, I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to roll it on my index finger and actually make my hook by folding this wire very tightly over the jaw of my plier. So if we look at my plier right there, you can see that wire is folded right over that jaw. Okay? Now, I'm going to hold on to this wire, and I'm going to grasp the tail and slightly offset my hook. Okay, and I did this one really exaggerated so you can see it. You see it looks like a kid's seagull, you know, a little drawing. okay? Anytime that you offset your wire, the offset goes in the direction that you are coming from. So if I'm beginning wrapping here, and I'm going to wrap in that direction down the length of my earring, then my offset is going to be on this side of my mark. Okay, the side of the bundle that you made your marks on, by the way, is your back. So this is where your bindings or wraps should begin and end. Okay, this is the most difficult part. Okay, I'm just going to tell you right now, shake out your hands, get it ready, because this is the hardest part. Holding this wrap wire exactly where you want it to be is the most difficult part of wrapping. I'm going to use my flat nose pliers, and I'm only going to hit it here on the bottom. Now, the reason that I'm only hitting my wire here is because the wire is only going to bend on the corner. Okay, it's not going to bend all the way across. And if you put your pressure on across the whole bundle, you're actually wasting strength and you're countering your move, making your wrap actually more loose. Okay, so now I have to be on the wrap wire every single time. I'm going to bring my plier up to the very top of my bundle. Do you see where my plier jaw is right at the very top of my bundle? Okay. This is the only time that the index finger is allowed to touch this wire. The only time. And I'm not in your house, so I can't tie your fingers to your hand, but I have been known to do so, so you might want somebody else to do it for you if you cannot keep your index finger from touching the wire, except for this one time. And this is going to shoot this wire over the top of your tool, which is actually, if you see, over the very top of your bundle. Okay? Now I'm going to rotate this like a propeller. Remember, with wire jewelry, you have to see what you're doing. So I have to turn my wire so that I can see where I'm working. I'm going to take my flat nose pliers and hold it any place on the right that's comfortable. With my non-dominant hand on the top, okay, my thumb here can only go up and down, and that's what we want. My index finger can do anything, so we're not going to use the index finger. We're going to use only the thumb. And after I have put this wire here, I'm going to use my thumb to press this wire up, telling the wire where to go. Now notice I didn't push it, whatever, because I have a tool for that. So I told the wire where to go. Now I'm going to take my flat nose pliers and I'm going to hit it only at the bottom, because that's where that wire bends. And look at that. You actually watch that. This wire jumped right over where it needed to be. Okay? Come up to the top of the wire, top of the bundle, and with your thumb, press your wire 90 degrees, again over the top edge of your tool, which is over the top edge of your bundle. Roll your bundle so it's facing you. Hold it anywhere on the right that's comfortable. With your thumb, tell the wire where to go. Put it there at the bottom with your tool. Support it at the top, and thumb 90 degrees. Roll it, hold it, tell it where to go. Put it there, support it at the top, 90 degrees. Now, if we look at this right here, I have two wraps here. And on the back, which is where my line is, I actually have my end and two. So I'm always going to have one more wire on the back because I always have an end. And after I put this next wrap on here, okay, I have 1, 2, 3. That's called 3 wraps to show. So anytime you see any of my directions or while we're talking and working together, if I tell you, okay, wrap 3 times to show, you know to put 3 wraps on the front, which means, as you'll see here, my last wrap on the back is going to be my 4th. Now, all of my wire wraps should begin and end pretty much across the entire bundle for this specific project. Okay, so I'm going to cut my wire, and I'm going to save the rest of this for my next set of wraps. I'm just going to put this wire down where it needs to be. Okay, so here I have a wire bundle with 1, 2, 3 wraps to show on the front, actually 4 wires on the back. So go on to your second bundle using the remainder of your 18 gauge half round wire, and let's go ahead and make 3 more wraps to show on the front of the second bundle. Now, if you can't remember what I did, remember, you can always rewind me and do this again. Okay, so now you have 2 earring bundles, each one wrapped 3 times to show on the front. And the shorter area is going to be the top of our earring. So go ahead and remove the tape. And as I remove this tape, I'm going to remind you, this is why, see as I unroll it, this is why I never stick my sticky to the sticky. This comes right off. I'm going to place the tape on my ruler so I can use it for another project. Now, we can do this together, or you can just watch me and see what I do and use your own ideas to create your own type of tulip and make your own earring design. So where I'm going to start is with the front of the earrings facing me. And because I want these to be matching pairs, I'm actually going to make each earring at the same time. I'm going to do the steps on one earring, and then I'm going to mirror the image on the other earring when it's necessary. So right here, I'm going to take each of the outside plain wires and just use my finger to bend them each down 90 degrees toward their respective sides. Now I'm going to measure each of these side wires from the edge of the bundle out to 3/4 of an inch and cut them, remembering that I need to hold my pliers properly and keep my little wires from jumping. Okay, now here's another quickie, all right? I measured it once, I made my cut, and now I'm going to make my other cut simply by lining my bundles up next to one another and using my tool to butt them against the wire ends. Okay, that's pretty cool, huh? All right, now let's use the round nose pliers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start small spirals at the end of each wire and roll them down using my round nose pliers to start them, and my flat nose pliers coming in at 5 o'clock to actually roll these. And I'm going to end up next to the wraps. Okay, we're going to do that on each side of each earring. All right, there we go. We have begun. Okay, now go ahead and bend out the second set of wires, which are the twisted wires. And let's take a little bit of a break from wire work and add our beads. Okay, you can be putting your beads on the top. I am going to be using, what did I use over here? I used 1/6. Okay, that looks good. This is a 6mm round faceted bead. And I topped it off with a 3mm round metal bead. Now, after I have my beads in place, you remember what to do. Use your chain nose pliers, hold it perpendicular to the product immediately after the last bead, and make a 90-degree bend with your finger. Okay, go ahead and repeat that on the second earring. Now here, because I have bent my first earring, the top of the wire, which is going to become the connection loop, I have bent that toward the left. Therefore, just to give you an idea of a mirror image, I'm going to bend this one to the right. Okay, now to make a connection loop. I'm going to use the number 2 on my round nose pliers. Bring my wire up and over. And seriously, because this is kind of small, I'm glad this happened here. Let's use the chain nose pliers to grab onto the end of the wire and bring it completely around the jaw. So I can complete my loop. Okay, now we're going to do a simple loop in this situation, and this is where I'm going to just cut the end or the tail of my wire. Remembering everything I keep is from the flat side up. And I'm going to press this into place with something with a flat inside. Okay. And now I'm actually going to push this loop I made down into my earring. So it's sitting right on top. Now that's going to make my bottom wire a little bit longer, but that's actually a good thing. So go ahead and make the connection loop on your second earring. Okay. Now you can kind of see, if you're familiar with my work, I have a design out there called the angel chandeliers. You can kind of see where that came from now. All right, let's continue on with the tulip. Now to make the tulip on the top, I'm going to hold the 6mm bead in place with my finger while I use my other hand to manually move both of these twisted wires up alongside the bead. Okay, let's repeat that on the second earring. Now I have to make sure that my wires are the proper length, meaning equal to one another. We don't want them to be any shorter than they are, but they do have to be the same length. So I'm simply going to place them side by side and make any necessary changes, which it looks like I only have one wire that's a little bit longer than the rest. There we go. So now that my wires are the same length, I have to trim them a little bit in order to make the tulip leaves. And I'm going to measure them from the top of the wrap out to 3/4 of an inch. I know, seems kind of silly that I had to trim them, but you never know. I might have changed my mind. Okay, this one looks pretty good. Actually, it does look really good. This one I thought one was a little bit longer, just a hair right here. Yeah, this isn't rocket science, not yet. Okay, so now we can move these wires just a little bit out and use your round nose pliers on the tip of the twisted wire. We're just going to roll these wires, don't pull. Okay, and if we roll them once and then halfway, we're going to form our first tulip leaf or tulip frond. I use my chain nose pliers to press them into place, move that just down a little bit. You can see what that kind of looks like, half of a tulip. Now I'm going to roll the piece in my hand so that I can hopefully duplicate the process on this side. Don't use your flat nose chains instead of your round. Go. Okay, and here we go. You have created your first tulip. What you're going to do now is you're going to make your second tulip on your second earring, and then we're going to make some more marks and do some more wrapping. Okay, so we have two tulips. There we go. Okay. And now we're going to go back to the back of our piece. We're going to do a little bit more measuring. Now, some people's wraps are not as tight as others, therefore I didn't do this all at once, okay? On the back of our piece, at the bottom of the last wrap, I'm going to measure down the length of my earring bundle and mark it at 1 inch. Okay, go ahead and mark your second earring bundle in the same fashion. If you want to do the flip thing, that works too. Okay, and this time I would like you to straighten, measure, and cut one piece of 18 gauge half round wire. It's only going to be 3 inches long. And sometimes some of the lengths that I give you are going to allow you a little bit of scrap, but that's because as a new person to this art form, sometimes it's a little difficult to play with wire that has very short tails, as we found out on the top of this earring. So sometimes I give you a little bit more leeway. So using your half round wire, 3 inches, remember that we're going to make a hook, offset in the direction that we're coming from. You're going to place your hook on your bundle. Up, and see, mine's backwards. It's offset here, so I would be wrapping that way. Just going to change that. Actually, you know what? Even easier. Just change the position of my earring. Okay, now I'm starting here and working that way. And I'm going to put 2 more wraps on. So remember, lock your wire on. Come to the top on the wrap wire, right to the very edge. Index finger, the only time it gets to play. 90 degrees over the top of the bundle, which is the top of the tool. Rotate this like a propeller. Okay, support, let me knock that up there. Support your wire and hold it anywhere on the right side that's comfortable. Use your thumb to tell the wire where to go. Put it there at the bottom with your tool. Stay on the wrap wire, come to the top of the bundle, support it, use your thumb and press 90 degrees over the edge. Roll it, hold it, tell it where to go, put it there, support at the top, 90 degrees. And we only need 2 wraps, so when you get to the back side, go ahead and trim, press it down. And the exciting thing, take off your tape. Okay, go ahead and use the remaining wire from the 3 inches and make 2 more wraps to show, beginning at the mark on your second earring and working back toward the first wrap. Okay, we're almost done. Let's do a little bit of decorating on the bottom, make another tulip, and then you're gonna have to make another pair of ear wires. With the front of the piece facing you, this is the side that does not have the ends of the wraps where they begin and end. I'm going to again move all of the wires away from the center, starting with the first plain wires, 1 on each side. And then I'm going to fan out the second twisted wire. And repeat this on the second earring. Okay, place the combination of beads that you would like on the bottom center wire. And I think I'm going to change mine around a little bit. We'll see if they work. I've got some 6mm rondelles. And I have these very cool little 4mm crystal spacers. That's kind of pretty. Maybe it's a bit too much. Okay, so let's just do 2 of the rondelles and then we'll try the spacer. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to break the color up just a hair. That'll work. Okay, I'm going to put a 4mm on the bottom. Now we're just going to make a very simple loop at the bottom of this piece. It doesn't have to be a wrapped loop. However, here we go again. If you wanted to, when you make your second pair, make one of these wires about 1/2 inch to 1 inch longer. Now you have the ability to actually make a very small loop on the end of that and hang a dangle from it. So here you go, building another design. Can't help it. Okay, I'm going to use my round nose pliers here to bend the wire first to one side and then grab onto the end and roll it backwards. Just putting a little tiny stopper on this, and I'll use my flat nose pliers to press it into place. Okay, so you saw when I folded that wire, it kind of jumped and split on me. Sometimes this happens. All we have to do is make an adjustment. Now, to make this type of an adjustment, I'm simply going to straighten out the rest of that wire. I'm going to remove a couple of these beads. And let's add something a little different. Let's put a 6mm round on here because we want to take up a little bit of space. There we go. Okay, I'm going to straighten that out. And one more time, let's try this again. Go ahead and use your round nose pliers to move your wire toward the side and then to roll the end back so that it ends up centered under your last bead. Okay? Now repeat that on your other earring. Now, because the first one I did to the right, I'm going to make this one go to the left. Not that it matters because this is not a rosette or a spiral, but because I want to stay in the habit of doing things in a mirror image. And again, I just turn the piece because my hand wants to go that way. And that's actually a little bit long because we broke it before. So let's just trim that. And run. And you know, accidents just happen and you just kind of take it and roll with it. Seriously, I have a lot of scrap wire at home, but hardly any of it is because I cut up a design. I just take what happens and go. This is how you make new designs. Okay, there we go. Now, the last steps. Okay, you're almost finished. Let's make our second tulips. Now, to do that, I'm again going to hold the beads in place with my index finger and bend the twisted wires down alongside the beads on both earrings. Okay, so let's make sure that these wires are the same length on each side. They don't need to be any shorter than they are, but they do need to be the same length. And once again, to make your tulip, move the wire slightly away from the beads so you have a room to work. Use the tips of your round nose pliers and roll the wire toward the bottom beads on each side. Now, I'm not going to place them yet. Let's just go to the next earring and repeat the step. Now let's take our final wires, the plain ones, and move them down. Okay, first I have to look at this and make sure that the back is facing me because I actually want these plain wires to sit behind the twisted ones. So if you can see, I just move those. It's actually covering the twisted wire, you see? So if the back is facing you, you can use your fingers to move these wires so that they are behind the twisted wires. Do that on each earring. Make sure that they are the same length. And this time you're going to roll these down You're going to end up immediately under the loops that we did for the first tulip, you see? Now, when I haven't placed them yet, we're going to place those in just a minute. Okay, so they're a little bit funky, but that's okay. Let's use the flat nose pliers and let's put them into place. So there you go. You have finished your first pair of traditional wire jewelry design earrings. You've done traditional wrapping. How cool is that? For more information about the supplies and techniques used, visit jewelschool.com. And if you have a question or a challenge, you can always email me, dale@jtv.com. I hope you've had as much fun today as I have. And if you think about it, combining your own imagination with the techniques we've learned, well, you could probably create an entire wardrobe of wearable wire art. Awesome. All right. I'll see you here next time in Jewel School.